Good afternoon, everyone. It is Thursday. No, yes, it's Tuesday. I know what day it is. Should we just start this again? Does anybody know what day it is? It's Tuesday. I know this at 4 p.m. ET, and I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, who clearly has no idea where she is, but I do know I am at crime time here on A Mighty Blaze with the amazing Heather Gudenkauf, whose brand new book, The Overnight Guest, is out today. This is riveting. It is twisty. It is dark. It is chilling. Let me just read you what Kirkus says. This says, masterful, terrible, and absolutely addicting, tense, taut, and terrifying. When you read that, Heather, what did you think?
I just couldn't believe it. I thought, oh, such high praise, and yeah, exactly what I was going for this novel. So it was really a treat to hear that, see that.
I mean, when you read the word terrible in the best
Hmm.
sense of
Right,
terrible, which means heartbreaking and
right.
riveting and so wrenching and so suspenseful, I can't wait to talk to you about
Yeah,
that. But it's
thank
launch
you.
day.
It
Amazing.
is.
Do you see I hold up the back of the book? I don't know what day it is. I don't know what side of the
Right.
book it is. Are you guys all happy you came? Um, this is launch day for the overnight guest, which is incredibly buzzy. And I guess you're not at home?
I'm not. If you could get a clue by looking right behind me here, I am in a beautiful bookstore, one of my favorite places in the world, in the town I used to live in. It's River Lights in Dubuque, Iowa, and I am doing an event just after we chat here, and they were kind enough to let me set up shop in this beautiful spot to talk with you today.
That's marvelous. What a wonderful bookstore. You used to
Yeah,
live in Dubuque, you said. Did you
yeah.
have a connection with this bookstore at the time?
Yeah, well, for a long time. So before I started writing, I was a classroom teacher. I taught third and fourth grades, and I had a nice relationship with the owners of the bookstore, where they would display my students' books that they would write
Oh,
and on the shelves, and they would host an author's tea for them. So they would serve cookies and juice, and my students could bring their families in and talk about the books that they have written. So it was so
oh.
much fun. So yeah, this
How old were they?
the students would have been about 7, 8 years old. So 8-year-olds,
That is the
and
cutest thing.
yeah, it was really special. And yeah, this is such a special place and special people and just wonderful.
And so how is it for you now after these years to come back and launch your books at the same bookstore where you made and they made so many kids into book lovers?
Yeah, it's the best place. So yeah, I really try to do all my initial book events here, just because of that. And it's like home to me. It's a second home, and it's always such a treat to come back.
And it's interesting to see you. I know you're having so many events in your launch
Mhm,
month as these things turn out to be, but to see you there in a real place
mhm.
where real people are actually going to come and talk with you. Is this the first time you've done a live event in a while?
It has, yes, it is. Yes, and it's just seems so brand new and exciting, and yeah, it's wonderful just to get back at it. And of course, we're being very safe here, masks, and want everybody to feel very comfortable. But there's something about being able to see readers and book lovers face to face and have those little conversations. So
And I
so
can,
happy.
yeah, I mean, I can understand that. It must be so reassuring too, and heartwarming actually, to know
Mhm.
that people want an autographed copy of The Overnight Guest so much that they could just stay home and click, but they'd rather come see you and listen to you and get an autographed copy of your book. And that, congratulations, that's such a testament to your readers.
Yeah, it's just so exciting, so much fun.
And we can have fun too, you all, because here on Crime
Yeah.
Heather is graciously giving away a copy of The Overnight Guest. It won't look exactly like this because this is an advanced copy, but you'll get a real life, gorgeous copy of The Overnight Guest. Just leave a question or a comment for Heather. And at the time that the interview is over today, about 35 minutes from now, one of the Blazers in the back room will draw a name and you will win a copy of The Overnight Guest. So we are grateful for that. If I look over here, that means I am looking at your comments. Sherry Steuben is saying you are 1.5 hours from me. I'm in Cedar Falls.
Oh, yeah.
So nice. Catherine is here. Janine is here in Manchester, New Hampshire, closer to me. Andrea is saying congratulations on your new book. Brenda is saying she won a trip to Dubuque once, and there's a story.
Yeah.
There's got to be a story behind that. So
Yes.
stories. Where were you, Brenda, that you won a trip to Dubuque? That is adorable. That is really off the beaten prize path in a kind of a way. Love that. I love that. Let me tell you quickly, speaking of book lovers and people like Brenda and all of you who are here today, you know that A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the fabulous Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us talking and keep us together and keep us meeting new authors and reading new books and meeting the authors of new books and brand new favorite books like The Overnight Guest and Heather Gudenkauf. And we are pleased that you are here today. Let me tell you quickly about Heather Gudenkauf. Is the Edgar Award nominated New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of 8 novels. Her debut novel, The Weight of Silence, was an instant New York Times bestseller and remained on the list for 22 weeks. That is incredible. Incredible. Gudenkoff's critically acclaimed novels have been published in more than 20 countries and have been included in many best of lists, including my own personal best of list, which is very difficult. Her brand new novel, The Overnight Guest, is being released today. Heather lives in Iowa with her family and a very spoiled German short-haired pointer named Lolo. How many of you know Lolo? Of course you do. Lolo is famous, Heather.
People love her so much. Much rather hear about Lolo than me. That's for sure.
Well, we can visit Lolo on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and we see her all the time. She is beloved. And I'd like you to have a wonderful relationship. So quickly about The Overnight Guest, I want to talk to you about true crime and weather and isolation and relationships and haunting pasts and getting to the truth. But if you could just tell us a little bit about what The Overnight Guest is about, just the basics, so all of us can understand it.
Yeah, so The Overnight Guest is about a true crime writer by the name of Wiley Lark, and Wiley is a true crime writer who decides to travel to Iowa to finish up her most recent project. And it just happens to be in the same house where a terrible crime had taken place 20 years before the crime she's writing about. And she gets settled into the house, and sure enough, a blizzard rolls in, and she finds herself isolated within the house, and everything goes. The power goes, the internet, everything. And she happens to look out her front door, in the snow is a small child laying there, and she doesn't know where the child came from, how they got there. And she, of course, brings the child in, nearly frozen to death. And that's where the real mystery begins. And little does she know that there are many other people out there who are interested in getting into the house.
I mean, you can even as you're describing that tiny little sliver of the story, I know that all of us who are listening are just envisioning this bleak, isolated, desolate place in a blizzard, and then there's a child at the doorstep. And of course, a true crime writer would want to figure out what had happened. And part of the story is her relationship with this child and how she tries to draw him out and how he doesn't want to connect with her. And the idea of communication in this part of the book is so critical. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is. When we first meet Wiley, she's really hard to get to know. She's very guarded herself. We don't know anything about her, really, about her past. We know she's come from the Northwest to, finish up this book that she needs to finish. And she has a strained relationship with her own son. And so when this child comes out, she finds this child, and she brings him into the home and trying to figure things out about him. We find her, kind of brusque at first, a little hard to read, but as she works to build this relationship with this child in a short amount of time under extreme circumstances, we see that she has quite the soft side to her as well.
And that is, she is someone who is trying to understand the past and understand herself and understand what's happened in her own family. She's a true crime writer, and that is a special breed. Talk a little bit about the true crime, what she's writing, and what the true crime she is writing about is.
Sure. So Wiley's writing about a crime that took place in this very rural community in the middle of Iowa, in this particular farmhouse. And it happened 20 years before, where two people were murdered in the house, and there was a subsequent missing person that they were looking for as well. So the story is really, the novel is really a novel with a true crime book interwoven throughout it. And we learn in that other narrative who the victims are, how this crime affects the town, the community, what the police procedures are all about. And, slowly we learn some clues. We get just as stymied as the police do. And so that's, interwoven with the story of Wiley and what's happening in present day in the house.
I mean, it's a gorgeous structure that is complex, but very simple to understand. And the reader easily gets drawn into the book that Wiley is writing and what's happening to Wiley in present day. How did you always plan to have the book in a book structure, or how did that evolve?
Yeah, I really wanted to. As I envisioned starting the book, I knew I was going to have at least two perspectives, the present day and the past. And I, like many people, are so fascinated with true crime. I listen to all the podcasts, I read the books, I watch the documentaries, and I'm not a true crime writer, but I have great respect for the work that they do. And I thought, well, if I'm not one, I can at least write like I'm one. And so I thought I would include that character in the book.
So did you write the parts separately, or did you write each part in order?
I started out, I separated them to begin with. So when I began the book, it was spring, it's summer. And so I focused on the sections that were in the summertime, and those are the sections in the past with the crime. And so I spent several months writing about that and the heat, Iowa summer heat, and it just worked out perfectly. And as summer turned to fall, I turned then to the winter scenes with Wiley in the farmhouse. And of course, Iowa never disappoints, and we had plenty of stormy, blizzardy weather. And so I wrote as far as I could with the first perspective, and then wrote as far as I could with the second, and wove those together.
And that's so brilliant. I want to say welcome to Sherry and Sharon, who's saying, I won this book and can't wait to get it. Janine is saying, oh, we'll ask some questions later.
Yes.
But welcome to all of you who are here today. When I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, just checking to see who is here. And I see Katie is here. Hey, Katie, welcome, welcome, welcome. And so many other people are here today. And that's the other thing, one of the other things that's so brilliant about the overnight guest, sometimes a structure can be difficult for a reader to grasp initially, but because the weather is so completely different in the two parts of the book, we instantly know that we're grounded in the past or in the present. And you said you did that because you started writing in the summer, or did you?
Well, yeah, I purposely did that just for that reason, because, I'm a big fan of reading books from multiple perspectives as well. But I do understand that shift of narrative can pull and push a reader in and out of the story. And I wanted to keep them firmly in each story. And this was one way, like you said, to ground them so they knew where they were at and when in the story it was taking place.
Yes, and it works. It works so beautifully. I'm just
Thank you.
carried away with both stories. Going back to the past
Mhm,
story, to the crime that
mhm.
Wiley is writing about, can you give us a little idea what that crime was? And obviously, you're not going to tell
Sure.
the results, but what is it that intrigued her, and what is it that people think happened?
Sure. So what had happened 20 years before, this great all-American family, farm family, a mother, a father, two kids, and the daughter, Josie, is having an overnight. So one of her friends from school, to celebrate the end of summer, they were going to go to the state fair in Des Moines. The following day, they were going to have an overnight. And so the two girls are so happy to be together, and they sneak out at night to go jump on their trampoline in the backyard, and gunshots are heard. And that's really the start of what happens in this book, and the crime, and what the police are trying to figure out.
And what the idea that you start with these girls in this very sweetly normal situation, with and then evil enters
Mhm.
somehow, whether it's the perpetrator of the crime or whether it's the weather, it's the things that can change a regular person's life. This is a kind of story that could really happen to anyone. They say in the business relatable, but but we really feel for all of the characters in the story.
Right. Yeah. I hope so. They are, people that we might know, in our own lives, and this tragic thing happens to them, and it's how they react to it, how they cope with it, how the town copes with it, the community, and of course law enforcement.
I mean, it's so interesting to think about being a true crime writer. I'm always been fascinated by that as a reporter because it makes me see how there are things that a true crime writer can't know. I mean, how do you know
Mhm.
what's true? I know that I think I have called this book, and we're talking about The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf, if you just joined us. I called this book a sort of modern day In Cold Blood because
Thank you.
Wiley is trying to do the same thing that Truman Capote did, is recreate what must have really happened and make it be true and make it be the truth. And
Right.
that's a difficult thing to divine.
It is, and she imagines what people might have said in those situations and what things might have looked like. And though she did, plenty of research for the book, and she has an inside track to that, she does tell the story in a way that makes you feel like you're right there.
And the thing about true crime is that once that story is set down, once the true crime writer writes it and creates it, that becomes true.
Right.
That becomes the real history of what happened. And a true crime writer who does a good job can essentially write the history of a thing.
Right. Yes. And that's what Wiley is trying to do.
And it's just terrific. Again, we're talking about The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkoff, and the overnight guest could be one of several people in the novel, so you will have to look and see who that is. The idea of isolation is so
Mhm.
prevalent in this book, and you have used it so gorgeously. These days with technology, it's very difficult to get people to be isolated. You can always pick up the phone or email someone. Talk a little bit about how you made that work so well.
Yes, yes. Well, and for the story to be told the way it needed to be told, there needed to be no communication with the outside world. And so what kinds of circumstances allow us anymore to do that? And what came to mind for me was an old-fashioned snowstorm, where power, the lines are freezing, and power lines are down, and cell towers are down, and there really just isn't a way to communicate with the outside world. And she's in such a rural location. The nearest neighbor is over a mile away. The roads are snowed in, making it just nearly impossible for her to get out and to connect with anybody. And added to that, she has purposely um, put herself in an isolated situation because she doesn't want to interact with people. All she wanted to do was finish her book.
And we all know that feeling, although it would not want to be caught in a blizzard to do it. But you're such an accomplished thriller writer, and you understand the idea of ratcheting up the suspense in a novel like this. So when everything is just fine, and then she finds this child on her doorstep. Not only does she have to solve the mystery of who he is and somehow get him to tell it, which he clearly doesn't want to do, but also the power's going out. It's cold. They are cut off. They may not have food. There's such a sense of imminent disaster coming at every moment. Are you conscious of that when you write?
Yeah, I really did try to layer that in because wanting the reader to feel how Wiley and this child ended up having to rely on one another. And it was just the two of them against the world in this very scary, cold, dark situation.
And that's so perfect for Iowa. Talk a little bit, Iowa weather is Iowa can be so beautiful and so peaceful and such a welcoming, warm place. And then in an instant, it can become threatening.
Yeah.
Even the roads that you describe are threatening. Talk a little bit about how connected you are with Iowa geography and weather.
Yeah, so I've lived in Iowa since I've been 3 years old, grew up here and lived in different parts of Iowa, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful state. People think of it as a flyover state or think of it only as corn and prairie, which is true. But we also have these beautiful bluffs, and we have cave systems and woods and these gorgeous gravel roads that wind throughout the countryside. And I really wanted to paint that picture for readers in the story. And, again, that isolation where, you're never really far from town, but when you're out of town, you're way out and there's just nothing out there.
And it's that sense of feeling with Wiley is so intense. I mean, we root for her so tremendously. We want her, we as writers want her book to work. And then when the boy shows up, we want him to be okay. And then we feel this looming danger over both of them. What was the very beginning nugget of this story? What was it that you thought, ooh, I could write a story about what?
Yeah, so like many writers do, I was on the internet just looking around for different ideas, and I stumbled on one of those websites that might say, 10 little known crimes in your state or 10 crazy things that happened in your state. And I was on a site, and it wasn't for the state of Iowa, but it was a Midwest state that told a very terrifying story of a young woman who was driving her car through a blizzard, slid off the road into a ditch, and had to decide whether she would stay with the car. The temperatures were 20 below, or did she try to walk to safety? She decided to try and walk the 2 miles to the house that she was trying to get to. And she almost made it. She was almost to the front steps, and she collapsed and wasn't found until the next day. And when she was found, she was, stiff as a board. Her eyes were frozen open, but she was alive. And the people in the home managed to get her into the car. She couldn't be put into the cab of a truck because they couldn't bend her limbs because she was so cold, but they were able to put her in the back of the car, drive her to the hospital. The medical personnel were trying to give her medication through a hypodermic needle. The needles would break. She was so cold, but she survived. And I thought, how interesting would that be for somebody to open up their door and to find someone in that state? And that was kind of the kernel of how the overnight guest began.
I can completely see your brain latching onto that and weaving that into a Heather Gudenkauf story. That's quite amazing. So funny how our writer brains work, that just the story that you need emerges from this random search. What do you think about that?
It's so funny, like you say, you just don't know what's going to click and really stick with you. And it really did. Once I saw that article, I could not put it out of my mind. And I knew I had to find some way to include it in the story.
And it's interesting because another writer would have made the main character be the person who was found. But you made the main character be the person who found the person who was so cold. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about Wiley and where she came from.
Yeah, Wiley, I just, with many of my characters, she's very strong, independent woman who has a mind of her own, has a past, and that she's just trying to find her way through the world. And it's not all rosy for her. And she's likable in many ways. She's kind of brusque in others. And as we get to know her, though, we realize her true heart and where she's come from and how she got to this place and why she cares so much about true crime and why it's her life's work.
I mean, getting to the truth is a very complicated thing. Sometimes, getting to the truth and examining the past can be a very delicate thing and can be a very risky thing. Sometimes it's easier just to say it's over.
Right. And there's so many different reasons for that. One being you're messing with a hornet's nest, bringing up some things from the past that maybe people don't want you to look into. We always have to remember that victims are real people and their families and people who love them, and that bringing that up can be painful in many ways for people. And but the truth is so important to her, and it's something that she needs to finish, and no matter the consequences.
And I love that you talk about her heart because your books, and again, we're talking about The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf, and we are giving away, Heather is giving away a copy of this book to one lucky commenter. So leave a question for Heather or leave a comment and you will be entered to win. I love that you're talking about the heart of Wiley and the heart of the people in these books because we really do feel for them. You create these characters. It's you, Heather, who has this wonderful heart, and you really search for the good in people, and that comes out so beautifully in your books. And I bet you don't think about that when you write.
Well, I don't know that I do. I hope so. I think, and you write similar books where there's dark subject matter and difficult subject matter. But I think what we want to as writers also is to have it infused with a sense of hope and for the future, and that good can come out of bad things, and that all is not lost, which I think is really important because life is hard. The world can be a hard place, but there's so much good as well.
Yeah, I love that about your books. I mean, I try to do that too, is at the end, I want my readers to say, oh, okay, this is good. This will be okay.
Right.
In some way, this will be okay, even though life is difficult and there has been a journey, there's been an evolution of a person. And that's what a thriller like this should be about. A good one, a good thriller, like The Overnight Guest. Did you always want to be an author? Did you always want to do this?
Well, I was a teacher first. I always, since I was a young child, wanted to be a teacher, and that was my path all along. But I always loved reading and writing, and so I kind of tucked that away. Whenever I could in college, I took a writing course, but I was, on the teacher path, and so I didn't really think about writing seriously until I'd been teaching for several years. My kids were young. And I had an idea for a story, and I just needed to sit down and write it. And that ended up being my first novel.
Which did pretty well. I can't imagine waking up for 22 Sundays, or I guess you find out on Wednesdays, to find out that your novel is yet again for 22 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, you're so experienced now, that just doesn't happen very often.
No, it does not. It was amazing. Yes. And you're right. It's hard. It doesn't happen often or easily in any way. And so it was such an honor, such an honor, and it was a lot of fun.
And again, you had, we talk about ideas. Again, you had this good idea, and your writer soul knew it would be a book, and you did it against so many
Mhm.
odds.
Yeah, it's just something I really needed to do. I had no experience in publishing. I didn't know anything about the industry, but I had the story. And I think when it comes down to it, that's what it's about, is writing the stories that you wanna read and you want to tell, and that you love the story you're telling. And that's what makes it easier to come back every day to the computer and continue to write.
Well, you can tell that you love this story. Anyone would
Yeah.
love the story of The Overnight Guest. It is your pub day. Congratulations. There
Thank
you
you.
are in a bookstore getting ready for your public to come applaud you. And we do that as well. Do you have time
Yeah.
to take a couple of questions? I see Casey
Sure.
Milnes is here saying happy pub day. That's
Yes,
wonderful.
thank you.
Casey is writing a wonderful book as well. But you have time for some
Oh,
questions?
absolutely. Yes.
Catherine is saying, is there anything you learned during the writing process from research or about writing or about yourself? That's interesting since this
Mhm.
was during the pandemic.
Yeah, I learned something about myself with every single book I write. Every project is different. I've learned over the years that I write in a way that I write ugly. I just get everything out on the page. I try not to think too much about changing things when I'm sitting down for that first draft, and then I have to go to town in the revision process, and that's where I say, for me, the real hard work begins, and I have to really dig in and mine what I've written to pull out the good things, the good stuff. And thankfully, I have a wonderful editor too, who's able to see past some of the ugliness in writing that I have, that I'm able to pull it out.
I mean, it's interesting because I do that. Do you write much long? Do you have to wind up cutting a lot of things and changing a lot of things?
Yes, lots of revisions for me, which is good. I mean, I think that's, once you come to terms with that as a writer, that everything doesn't stick, and it's a process, and you're looking for the best parts of the book, and you're learning something every time you sit down about your characters, about the story. And so things are going to change and evolve and hopefully get stronger and better.
Just so you know, I'm working on my 14th book, and I over the past couple of weeks just cut 19,000 words.
Wow, it's painful. It's got to be
Oh,
painful.
well, so here's what I know you'll understand.
Hmm.
I loved it. I loved
Yeah, good,
because I
good.
thought, here comes my book is coming out. I'm taking away everything that isn't the book, and
Right,
what's left is what should be there.
right.
And so when people say, oh, I hate to kill your darlings, and I'm like, they're not my darlings. They're mucking up the pacing of my
Right.
book. So I don't want them. So I'm thrilled to cut them. And there is a wonderful part of editing that allows that to happen. And I'm sort of getting that you feel the same way about it.
Absolutely, and I think you're right, especially with pacing, especially with thrillers.
Yeah.
We have to keep the story moving along, and it's so important that we, keep and highlight those important pieces that will move the story forward.
Exactly. We had another question, which
Yep.
there we go.
Yeah.
Sully says, oh, hey, welcome. What are some of your favorite true crime podcasts and books?
Oh my gosh, so many. But recently I listened to a podcast called Suspect, which was absolutely fascinating. It was the story of a murder mystery, true crime, that occurred at a Halloween party.
Oh.
And this mystery spanned years and has so many twists and turns that like they say, truth is stranger than fiction, and this certainly is. So I highly recommend that one. I'm a big fan of Criminal, which is another podcast that takes a little different take on true crime. One week you might be learning about a crime that took place 100 years ago, and then another week you might learn about one that took place a year ago. And so it's really interesting. Has a different take on crime. As for true crime books, one of my all-time favorites is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, which is retelling account of all the different information out there about the hunt for the Golden State Killer. And so she had decades of documents to go through, and it was just a beautifully written book, I think.
Definitely so.
Yeah.
And what is it about, when you're writing fiction, you can have an ending, you can make an ending. But
Mhm.
often in true crime stories, there isn't. And I remember reading an interview with Truman Capote, who was so affected by writing In Cold Blood because there was no ending.
Right.
He had the book written, but Hickok and Perry were not. They had no ending yet, and he had to hope. He was saying that this is so creepy, waiting to see what would happen to them because he couldn't finish the book until whatever happened to them happened. And it's
Right.
interesting too, when you write fiction, though, you can give it an ending. You have to give it an ending. Did you know
Yeah.
your ending?
I thought I knew it, but it always changes along the journey with me. Yeah, and I think you're completely right with, with as humans, we seek endings. We like things wrapped up, and I think that's why we're drawn to thrillers and crime books as well, because we get to see hopefully justice on the page. And but yeah, for me, I always think I know where the book's going. My characters, more often than not, take me in a completely different direction.
And we love that, right?
Yes, it's fun. It does make it fun and interesting.
And also in books, we can make sure there's not only sort of an ending that has to do with justice, but emotional ending
Mhm.
and a
Right.
moral ending and a sort of storytelling thematic ending. And that's so well done in your books.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That the human condition, it's something I try to hopefully include in all my books. And, we want to know what happens to the characters. We want to know how they've been impacted and what's next for them. So I always try to include a snippet of that as well.
Of course, our fiction is just as real for those people as real life is for us. I think we have
Right.
time for one more question.
Right.
Is there a million more? Heather and Hank, do you ever scare yourself? Have there been characters that you had a hard time letting go of or getting away from? What a good question, Heather. Do you scare yourself?
I don't scare too easily. I do not. But there have been moments where I've had to get up from the computer and walk away, and when a scene gets pretty intense. And yes, there are absolutely characters that I have a hard time letting go of. There's some from each book that really stick with you. Oh gosh, I could name one from each of my books. So, yes,
And that'll be fun to find them for ourselves and
yes,
see which ones we latch onto.
yes,
I get
yes.
sad in my books. I
Mhm,
think I'm not, I kind of know when I'm finished when I sort of start to cry. When
mhm.
I get the right ending and I feel my eyes well up a little bit, and then I think, oh, this must be done. This must be right. The only time
Yeah.
I'm scared is when I can't think of what the book is. It's about the middle of the book, and I think I have no idea.
Yeah,
And this
yeah,
is
that's terrifying.
that is the
That's
most terrifying
that
thing
is, yes.
that all authors share, I think. We have one more minute, so don't
Okay.
forget to put in an accolade for Heather or
Mhm.
applause or tell her how much Janine is saying, love this event. See, that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Brenda's saying, have you eaten food from Really Ray's Q Shack in Cedar Rapids? Oh, do you know about
Yes, yes, I do, and I have not, but that is on the top of our list. We haven't eaten out a lot during the pandemic, but Willie Ray is a, a city treasure for us. He travels to places where there are tragedies, the tornadoes in Kentucky. He's gone to Texas when they had the freeze out there, and he brings his food and his grill, and he will cook for people.
Oh,
So yes, absolutely. Anybody who gets a chance to go there, visit him, we have to put it on our list for sure.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Brenda, thank you for telling
Yeah.
us about that.
Mhm.
Janine is saying, love this event. Bozenia is saying, what a night for me. Thank you. Catherine saying, this has been very fun. And Sherry says, and Poppy G is here. Wonderful. Welcome. Poppy G lives in Australia,
Oh,
where
hi,
it is
Poppy.
tomorrow or something. I don't know.
Yes.
That's why I didn't know what day it was at the beginning.
Yes.
And Katie Mursky has won a copy of the Early Night Guest.
Congratulations.
Katie is an author in her own right, a wonderful author, and this is a wonderful book for her. I know you have to go to your event.
Yeah. Well,
Get applause from your many other fans. Congratulations on the
thank you
Overnight
so
Guest.
much. I always love talking with you, Hank, and so excited to be here with the Mighty Blaze.
We're grateful that you're here, and we're grateful that you all are here today joining us. Come back next week on Tuesday. Look who we have. Ooh, Adele Parks. You're going to be this is so great. This is such a good book, and she's quite amazing. So do not miss it. Next week at 4 p.m. ET, we will talk to the fabulous Adele Parks. Until then, you all keep reading, stay safe, and we will see you at the next Crime Time. Talk to you later.